Well, thank you so much, Struan, and it's a great honour for me to be joining such distinguished colleagues this afternoon. And I'm particularly aware of how much work you, Struan, have put into this campaign and what you have done for the people of Iran. So I think you're a great standard to follow. I particularly want to pay tribute to the women of Iran. They are really playing a very active and prominent role in the popular protests, which of course are ongoing. Women are really in the forefront of these protests. They're challenging the regime's misogynist and repressive policies. And just by their active participation in civil disobedience, they really are a driving force for change in Iran. And they've been given a platform, and they're inspired by the NCRI president-elect, Maryam Rajavi, a lady for whom I have enormous respect. She has done so much, and she is leading the Iranian resistance movement, a movement that embraces and encourages the leadership role of women. And the NCRI is in such stark contrast to this ghastly theocratic dictatorship in Iran, which has really tried to reduce women to second-class citizens. And of course, that is why the regime sees the NCRI and Madam Rajavi as a serious threat to its survival, especially as these popular protests are continuing in the country. So the regime desperately hopes to eliminate this source of inspiration for Iranian women. And as has been mentioned already several times this afternoon, we've seen its terrorist operations against the NCRI's gatherings abroad, both in Paris in June 2018 and in Albania earlier the same year. And at the same time, the regime is cracking down heavily and brutally on the protests in Iran. A recent report by Amnesty International revealed that more than 7,000 men, women, and children were arrested in connection with the nationwide protests in 2019. And it says the Iranian authorities have committed further widespread patterns of serious human rights violations. These include many forms of torture, beatings, mock executions, waterboarding, sexual violence, floggings, electric shocks, the forced administration of chemical substances, and the deprivation of medical care. In addition to this, hundreds of people have been subjected to grossly unfair trials on baseless, trumped-up national security charges. And we've also seen death sentences handed down on the basis of so-called confessions obtained through torture. So given the gravity of the violations perpetrated and the systematic impunity that prevails in Iran, Amnesty International is renewing its call on member states of the UN Human Rights Council to mandate a UN-led inquiry into the violations, with, of course, the view to ensuring accountability and guarantees of no repetition. The UK government and other European countries, and I want to include here also the European Union, who have an appalling record of supporting the Iranian regime. They must all heed this call. They must take the regime's human rights violations seriously and the regime's state terrorism against Iranian dissidents in Europe, which of course are related issues. There must be a firm policy to counter the Iranian regime and to hold the regime's leaders to account for these atrocities and these acts of terrorism. We must also support the Iranian people and their resistance movement for change. So part of this policy must include making trade and diplomatic relations with Iran contingent upon an end to support for terrorism an end to executions, and the immediate release of all political prisoners. They must also pledge to investigate all the possible terrorist activities in Europe by the Iranian regime, and to prosecute those responsible, and to expel Iranian diplomats who facilitate these crimes. It's time we all stood up to them and supported the Iranian resistance movement and Mariam Rajavi, and I am very privileged to be able to do so.